Marcus looked at me with those warm brown eyes that made me feel safe, his hands gently holding mine as we sat surrounded by wedding magazines and invitation samples. "So babe, what about your dad? I know it's complicated, but have you decided about the guest list?" I felt my stomach tighten at the question I had been dreading for months. My fiancé deserved an answer, but how do you explain that inviting your father means inviting the woman who made your childhood a living nightmare? Patricia had spent 15 years making sure I knew I didn't belong in my own family. And my dad, David, had chosen her feelings over mine every single time. Before I share what happened next, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family drama and standing up for yourself. Trust me, you won't believe how far my dad was willing to go to protect his wife's feelings over his own daughter's happiness. So grab a cup of coffee and settle in, because this wedding planning journey took some seriously unexpected turns. Looking back, I can trace the exact moment my family fell apart. I was 13 when my mom lost her 2-year battle with cancer. Those last months were brutal, watching this vibrant woman who taught me to braid my hair and bake chocolate chip cookies slowly fade away. Dad grieved hard for about 6 months, barely speaking, barely eating. Then one day, he came home from work, talking about Patricia, a colleague's friend who had also lost her spouse. They rushed into everything. After just 1 year of dating, Dad announced they were getting married. Patricia had 2 kids from her previous marriage, Kyle, who was 15 at the time, and Madison, who was 11. I wasn't comfortable with how fast everything was moving, but Dad seemed happy again, and I desperately wanted that for him. The warning signs started immediately after Patricia moved in with Kyle and Madison. She rearranged our entire house within the first week, boxing up all of Mom's photos and storing them in the attic. When I protested, Dad said Patricia needed to make the house feel like home for everyone. My bedroom, which had been my sanctuary, suddenly needed to be smaller because Madison needed more space for her art supplies and dance costumes. The kitchen became Patricia's domain. She would prepare elaborate, healthy meals for Kyle and Madison, measuring out their portions and explaining nutrition facts. For me, there were always leftovers from the night before, or sometimes just a sandwich thrown together at the last minute. When I mentioned I was still growing and maybe needed more food, Patricia would smile sweetly and say I was lucky to get anything at all, considering how much groceries cost. School events became particularly painful. Patricia never missed Kyle's baseball games or Madison's dance recitals, but she was always too busy when I had cheerleading competitions or academic award ceremonies. She would schedule dentist appointments or shopping trips during my events, then act surprised that there was a conflict. Dad would shrug and say we would celebrate later, but later never came. The worst part was watching my father slowly transform from the man who used to read me bedtime stories into someone I barely recognized. Initially, he tried to balance everyone's needs. He would defend me sometimes when Patricia's favoritism became too obvious. But Patricia was clever. She used tears, accusations that he didn't love her enough, ultimatums about choosing between his old family and his new one. The pivotal moment happened on my 14th birthday. Patricia had planned a surprise trip to the local amusement park for the family. She bought tickets for everyone except me. When I asked about mine, she gasped and claimed she had forgotten, but the park was sold out for the day. Dad looked uncomfortable, but decided they should go anyway rather than disappoint Kyle and Madison. I spent my birthday with Mrs. Henderson next door, watching them leave without me. That night, lying in bed listening to them laugh about their day, I realized I had lost my father forever. High school became a battlefield where Patricia wielded psychological warfare with surgical precision. She had an uncanny ability to sabotage the things that mattered most to me always, with plausible deniability that made me look paranoid when I complained. The cheerleading incident still makes my blood boil. Before our biggest game of the season, I discovered my uniform in the hamper, grass-stained and reeking. Patricia claimed she had forgotten to wash it, though she had somehow managed to clean Kyle's baseball uniform twice that week. I had to wear a backup uniform that didn't fit properly, and our coach benched me for looking unprofessional. College applications nearly broke me. I had worked incredibly hard to maintain a 4.0 GPA, hoping for scholarships that would get me out of that house. When acceptance letters started arriving, they mysteriously disappeared from our mailbox. I only found out about my acceptance to University of Oregon because they called when I didn't respond to their scholarship offer. Patricia was in the kitchen when I took the call, and I watched her face fall as she realized her sabotage had failed. When graduation approached, Patricia invited her entire extended family to the ceremony, claiming there wasn't room for my friends. I watched Kyle and Madison's grandparents, aunts, and cousins fill up our allotted seats, while my best friend Sarah sat alone in the general audience. After the ceremony, Patricia organized a family dinner at an expensive restaurant, then loudly announced they couldn't afford to pay for additional guests when I asked if Sarah could join us. At 16, I got a part-time job at a local coffee shop, desperate for some independence and spending money. Patricia instituted a household rule that I had to contribute half my earnings to family expenses. Meanwhile, Kyle received a generous allowance for doing minimal chores, and Madison got extra money for every A on her report card. When I protested the unfairness, Dad said I needed to learn responsibility and teamwork. My first serious relationship became another casualty of Patricia's manipulation. Jake was a sweet guy from my chemistry class who actually seemed to like me. Patricia made it her mission to destroy that relationship by calling his mother and sharing carefully crafted stories about my behavior problems and family conflicts. Jake's mom forbade him from dating someone from such an unstable home. He broke up with me via text message, too embarrassed to explain what his mother had told him. Prom season brought fresh humiliation. Patricia bought Madison, who was still 3 years too young for prom, a stunning purple gown for future use. She gave me $50 and directions to the discount dress shop, suggesting I find something simple and appropriate. I ended up wearing a dress from Goodwill that I altered myself pretending I had chosen the vintage style on purpose. Throughout all of this, Dad defended every single one of Patricia's actions. When I tried to explain how hurt I was, he would say Patricia was trying her best to blend our families and I was being dramatic. When I complained about the unfair treatment, he accused me of being jealous of my step-sibling's success and suggested I try harder to earn Patricia's approval. My breaking point came during my senior year when I finally convinced Dad to attend family therapy. I had saved money from my job to pay for the sessions, hoping a neutral professional could help them see what was happening. Instead, Dad and Patricia presented a united front to Dr. Wilson, describing me as a difficult, resentful teenager who refused to accept their new family structure. They painted themselves as patient, loving parents who were at their wits' end with my behavior. After that session, Dr. Wilson asked to speak with me privately. She told me she could see exactly what was happening in our family dynamic and that my feelings were completely valid. She encouraged me to start planning an exit strategy for college because the environment at home was emotionally abusive and unlikely to change. The final betrayal came when Dad missed my high school graduation to attend Kyle's baseball tournament in another state. He claimed Kyle's game was more important because it was a playoff, and I would have other graduations in my future. I walked across that stage with Mrs. Henderson cheering from the audience, feeling completely alone despite being surrounded by hundreds of people. College became my escape route, though leaving home required strategic planning worthy of a military operation. I had secretly applied for multiple scholarships and grants, forging ahead with applications even when Patricia tried to discourage me from pursuing higher education. When I received a full academic scholarship to University of Oregon, I kept the news to myself until the last possible moment. The announcement caused an explosion at home. Patricia flew into a rage about how I had made major life decisions without consulting the family. She accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, pointing out all the things she had done for me over the years. Dad was angry about being blindsided, claiming I had deliberately excluded them from something as important as choosing a college. Moving day arrived without any help from Dad or Patricia. While I was loading boxes into Mrs. Henderson's car, Patricia threw away my childhood stuffed animals and memory box, claiming she was cleaning out my room for Madison to use as a study space. I only discovered this when I came back inside to grab my last bag. College opened my eyes to what normal family relationships looked like. My roommate, Sarah, regularly video called her parents, who asked about her classes, her friends, and her happiness with genuine interest. When Sarah's family visited for Parents' Weekend, they included me in their dinner plans and treated me with the kind of warmth I had almost forgotten existed. Her mother even sent me care packages for the rest of the semester. For the first time in years, I thrived without constant criticism and manipulation. My grades soared, I made genuine friends, and I started to remember who I was before Patricia entered our family. The contrast made me realize just how toxic my home environment had been. After graduating with honors, I built a successful career as a graphic designer in Portland. I kept minimal contact with Dad, limiting our communication to obligatory holiday phone calls and twice-yearly visits that I endured rather than enjoyed. Patricia still made snide comments during these visits, suggesting that I had finally gotten my life together and expressing fake disappointment that I lived so far away. Meeting Marcus changed everything. We met at a mutual friend's wedding 3 years ago, and from our first conversation, I knew he was different. He listened when I talked, supported my goals, and never made me feel like I was asking for too much by wanting basic respect and kindness. His family welcomed me immediately, treating me like the daughter they had always wanted. When Marcus proposed on a quiet beach at sunset, he told me he understood my family situation was complicated, and whatever I decided about our wedding would be fine with him. He had seen enough of my relationship with Dad to know that including Patricia might ruin what should be the happiest day of our lives. Wedding planning began with excitement and joy, but the guest list conversation filled me with dread. Marcus's family was easy to include. They had been nothing but supportive and loving since the day we met. My side of the family presented a much more difficult challenge. After months of internal struggle and several therapy sessions with Dr. Wilson via video call, I made my decision. I would invite Dad, but not Patricia. This wasn't about revenge or spite. It was about protecting my happiness on the most important day of my life. When I called Dad to explain my decision, the conversation went exactly as poorly as I had expected. Patricia has never supported my happiness, I told him calmly. I want this day to be positive and filled with love. Having someone there who has spent 15 years making me feel unwelcome in my own family doesn't align with that vision. Dad's response was immediate anger. You cannot break up our family like this, Jenna. Patricia is my wife. You're asking me to choose between you two, and that's not fair. I pointed out that he had been choosing between us for 15 years, and his choice had never been me. This conversation ended with him hanging up on me, but I felt lighter than I had in months. I had finally stood up for myself. 2 weeks later, Dad and Patricia showed up at my apartment unannounced. Patricia had clearly been crying, and she launched into a performance about how she had tried so hard to be a good stepmother to me. She claimed my rejection of her invitation had triggered severe anxiety attacks, and she couldn't understand why I was being so cruel. Dad demanded I change my mind, lecturing me about how compromise was part of adult relationships. When I held firm, explaining that I was happy to have a relationship with him separately, but couldn't include someone who had been emotionally abusive, he made a threat that chilled me to the bone. You're going to regret this decision, Jenna. You have no idea how much damage this kind of selfishness can cause. Dad's threat turned out to be a promise he fully intended to keep. Within days of our confrontation, Patricia launched a comprehensive campaign to destroy my reputation and sabotage my wedding. She started by contacting every member of our extended family, spinning a carefully crafted story about how I had become a bridezilla who banned an innocent stepmother out of pure spite. She told my aunts and uncles that Patricia had tried desperately to have a good relationship with me, but I was too damaged by my mother's death to accept love from anyone else. The phone calls from confused family members started almost immediately. My Aunt Linda called in tears, saying she couldn't understand how I had become so vindictive. My cousin Mark sent a long text message about forgiveness and family loyalty. Each conversation was exhausting because I had to defend a decision that shouldn't have needed defending. Dad took the campaign a step further by contacting Marcus's parents directly. He called them one evening and expressed his concerns about my mental stability, claiming I was vindictive toward family members and might not be the right partner for their son. He painted himself as a worried father who was concerned about Marcus's future happiness. Fortunately, Marcus's parents had spent enough time with me to know Dad's claims were ridiculous. Marcus's mother called me immediately after the conversation to let me know what had happened and to assure me that they supported whatever decisions I made about my wedding. Patricia's next move was reaching out to my childhood friends through social media. She sent carefully worded messages expressing sadness about how cruel I had become, suggesting that my mother's death had changed me in ways that were concerning to witness. Several old friends reached out to me, confused by these messages and wanting to understand what was happening. The most outrageous escalation came when Dad called my employer. He spoke to my boss, claiming he was concerned about my mental health and wondering if they had noticed any erratic behavior at work. My boss was professional enough to tell me about the call, but the fact that Dad had tried to sabotage my career was a line I never imagined he would cross. Anonymous negative reviews started appearing on my freelance business website, all written in a suspiciously similar style, and focusing on concerns about my reliability and professionalism. I couldn't prove Dad or Patricia had written them, but the timing was too coincidental to ignore. Our wedding vendors began receiving phone calls from someone questioning my character and ability to pay for services. My florist mentioned that a woman had called asking if I seemed stable enough to follow through with my commitments. My caterer received a similar call warning them that I might be difficult to work with. The final straw came when Dad showed up at my office building demanding to speak with me and causing a scene in the lobby when security wouldn't let him up to my floor. He shouted loud enough for other people to hear that I was destroying our family and that he was worried about my mental state. Security had to escort him out of the building while he continued yelling about what kind of daughter treats her father this way. That evening, I realized Dad had crossed the line from guilt trips and manipulation into active sabotage of my life and career. This wasn't grief or disappointment anymore. This was warfare, and he was willing to damage my professional reputation to force me back into compliance with Patricia's demands. I consulted with a lawyer the next day about harassment and defamation. We documented everything: the harassing phone calls, the negative reviews, witness statements from my workplace, and records of Dad's attempts to interfere with my wedding vendors. The cease and desist letter we sent to both Dad and Patricia was comprehensive and legally binding. It warned them that any further attempts to contact my employer, my vendors, or my friends would result in a restraining order and possible legal action for defamation and harassment. Receiving that legal letter seemed to shock Dad into understanding how serious I was about protecting myself and my wedding. The harassment stopped immediately, but the damage to our relationship was permanent. I called a family meeting with my extended relatives, presenting them with evidence of Dad and Patricia's behavior over the years. My aunts and uncles were horrified when they saw the full picture rather than Patricia's carefully edited version. They apologized for doubting me and promised to support whatever decisions I made about my wedding. My uncle Robert, who was my mom's younger brother, was particularly upset. He confronted Dad directly, telling him that his sister Sarah would be disgusted by his actions. That little girl lost her mother and needed her father, he said. Instead, you chose a woman who made her feel unwelcome in her own home. I changed our wedding venue at the last minute to ensure complete privacy and hired security to handle any potential disruptions. I also made it clear to everyone that anyone who couldn't respect my decision to exclude Patricia was welcome to skip the wedding entirely. My wedding day turned out to be everything I had dreamed it would be. Marcus looked incredibly handsome in his navy blue suit, and I felt beautiful in my grandmother's vintage lace dress, which had been carefully preserved by Mrs. Henderson all these years. Uncle Robert walked me down the aisle, tears in his eyes, as he whispered that Mom would be so proud of the strong woman I had become. The ceremony was intimate and perfect, filled with people who genuinely loved and supported us. Mrs. Henderson attended as my honorary grandmother, her presence meaning more to me than any biological family member could have. Sarah, my college roommate who had become my best friend, served as my maid of honor and gave a speech about my resilience and strength that brought everyone to tears. There was no drama, no Patricia causing scenes, no Dad making the day about his hurt feelings. Just pure joy and celebration of love. For our father-daughter dance, Uncle Robert and I danced to the song Mom used to sing to me when I was little. It was an emotional moment that felt like healing rather than loss. Marcus's father officially welcomed me to their family during his speech, saying they had gained not just a daughter-in-law, but a daughter they loved dearly. Our honeymoon was 2 weeks of complete peace, without family drama or wedding stress. When we returned home, I learned that Dad had been calling my neighbors and former workplace, still trying to reach me and explain his side of the story. The most shocking news came 6 months later when Patricia left Dad for a wealthier man she had met at her yoga studio. She claimed she had found a better opportunity for herself and her children, abandoning Dad just as quickly as she had attached herself to him 15 years earlier. Kyle and Madison, now adults, reached out to me for the first time since I had left for college. Kyle apologized for the years of preferential treatment, explaining that they had always known Patricia's behavior toward me was wrong, but they had been children who were afraid to speak up. Madison thanked me for showing them what standing up for yourself looked like. She admitted that Patricia had been emotionally manipulative with them too, and watching me set boundaries had inspired them to do the same. Dad, now alone and abandoned by the woman he had chosen over his daughter, attempted reconciliation by showing up at my apartment on Christmas morning with flowers and tears. He broke down and admitted that Patricia had been manipulative and that he had been wrong to choose her feelings over mine for so many years. I listened to his apology with compassion, but maintained firm boundaries. I forgive you, I told him, but trust has to be rebuilt slowly, and it requires consistent actions, not just words. Dr. Wilson helped me process years of trauma and gaslighting through continued therapy sessions. My marriage with Marcus continued to thrive, supported by his family, who had become the loving, supportive family I had always needed. I started a blog about setting boundaries with toxic family members, sharing my story and offering support to other people navigating similar situations. The response was overwhelming, with hundreds of women reaching out to share their own experiences and thank me for showing them that they weren't alone. Dad entered counseling to understand his mistakes and work on rebuilding our relationship. Our contact remained very limited: supervised visits, no overnight stays, and clear boundaries about what topics were and were not acceptable to discuss. When Marcus and I announced we were expecting our first child, Dad expressed hope about being a grandfather. I was clear with him that our child would never experience the emotional neglect and manipulation I had endured. This baby will grow up knowing they are loved unconditionally, I told him. If you want to be part of that, you need to prove you understand what that means. Looking back on everything, I have found peace with my decision to protect my wedding day from Patricia's toxicity. That choice led to protecting my marriage, my career, and ultimately my future family from the dysfunction that had defined my childhood. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes protecting your own peace is the most loving thing you can do for yourself. I spent years hoping my dad would choose me over his wife's comfort. When I finally chose myself over his approval, I found the happiness I had been searching for all along. What would you have done if you were in my situation? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members to protect your own happiness? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve love and respect from the people closest to them. Thank you for listening to my story.